welcome back to another video. So today in this video I have some of what I think are the most popular coloring books in the coloring community, at least the ones I see being shared the most in my Facebook group, and just some of the coloring books that I know a lot of us colorists really love. I have a lot of new subscribers here on my channel, and I've seen a lot of you say that you are new to this hobby, so welcome to my channel. But I thought that this video would be really helpful to not just beginners, but some intermediate colorists as well. So today in this video, I'm just going to do some comparisons between the different coloring books. We're going to talk a little bit about the paper that is in each one of these books and which colored pencil sets or mediums work best in each one of them. If you check the description box down below, you'll find links down there to my Facebook group, my email list, my Etsy shop, and my Patreon if you would like to support me there. I also now have channel membership. If you would like more information on that, you can click the join button down below. So some of the coloring books we're going to compare today are Rita Berman's Europa, and the paper is the same throughout all of her coloring books. So I just pulled out one coloring book from each one of these artists. The next one I have is Botanicum by Maria Trolle. I also have Romantic Country. This is the first tale. I have Johanna Basford's World of Flowers because I have lots of different examples to show you throughout this whole entire book because I've tested so many different pencils in this book. I also have Kirby Rosanes' Worlds Within Worlds, and I have some examples to show you in here as well, and I actually just tested some other pencils in here before doing this video. I also have Magical Dawn by Hannah Karlzon, and I also have many different examples in this book, and I've tried out quite a few different things in this book as well. And I think maybe we should start with the Rita Berman book. Now, the first thing I want to talk about with the Rita Berman book is that they are a smaller book. And so I will bring in Johanna Basford's World of Flowers over here, and I'm going to show you the difference in the size of these two books so you could see how much smaller it is. This book is fantastic if you just want to do a very quick color, and the artwork inside is more whimsical and it's just very cutesy, and it's a lot of fun to color in these books. So let's go ahead and look in this book and check out the paper. But this book would be a great book if you were trying to be mobile with your coloring and you just wanted to bring a small set of colored pencils and one coloring book. You could surely do that with this one. Now, the paper in this book is quite smooth. It does have a very little bit of tooth to it, but not much at all. I'll go ahead and flip the page here so this way you can get an idea or a feel for the paper if you don't have one of these books quite yet. But the paper is really nice, and it is a rather good thickness. The only thing about this book is that it does have artwork on both sides. So if you were going to bring other mediums into this book, that maybe a wet medium or something that is going to go through to the other side like an alcohol marker, I would just worry that you would lose the artwork on the other side. And this book has so many beautiful images in it that I probably wouldn't want to do that. So in this book, I plan on just using my colored pencils. Now, I've not had this book for that long, but I did test out a couple pencils on this page here. Right here, I used Prismacolors, and I really wasn't, I don't know, the Prismacolors were okay to me. When I tested them out in this book, they were really just okay. I really wasn't sure about them, and I don't know if maybe it was the color combination that I used, but I really think it was just that I didn't really care for how they laid down. Now, just before I filmed this video, I tested out my polychromos and I colored part of this little envelope here. And oh my goodness, let me tell you, the polychromos go down in this book like an absolute dream. And I absolutely love this color combination. So if you were looking for a polychromos color combination and you really like that, here are the colors that I used. This one is Prussian blue, the mid-tone is middle phthalo blue, and the lightest color or the highlight color that I chose was light cobalt turquoise, but it came out absolutely beautiful. I did try to use a little bit of the white of the paper, but the way the colors moved after I got layer after layer down there, and the way that the color just layered and moved around and gave me that ability to be able to blend was just wonderful. Now, when I used the Prismacolors always blend really nicely, really in any book, but I really think that I liked the Polychromos much, much better. And reason for that is I think that the Polychromos work better when the paper is a little bit smoother. But if you'd like to see some of the artwork in this book, it is very whimsical and cute. I really don't know another way to describe it, but I absolutely love her artwork. It is a more cutesy style, but if you like that kind of thing, you will absolutely love her books. And like I said, this book is fantastic to take with you if you're traveling because it is so small. If you want to do just a quick color and get a page done in a couple days and you are a slow colorist, this may be the book for you. Okay, so the next book I have is Hannah Karlzon's Magical Dawn, and I want to show you a little bit of a sizing comparison first if you don't already have any of her books. And so here I have an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and I'm just going to lay this right down here and so you can see the size of the book. The book is probably right about 8 by 10 because it is very even here at the bottom with the paper. But at the top, we have just a little bit of it hanging off, and it pretty much fits right on top as far as the width. And compared to Johanna Basford's books, this is the difference in the size, since I know a lot of us are very familiar with Johanna Basford's books. Now, I do want to mention the paper in these books is not a bright white. Hopefully you can see that on camera. Maybe I'll grab a book that is a bright white and show you a comparison. So here is a Kirby Rosanes book, and this book has actual white paper. So this paper here I would consider more to be a bright white paper. So you can see the comparison between this and then the paper you're going to get in the Hannah Karlzon books. But the paper in these books is a really nice quality paper. They are a hardback book, as you can see. So I feel like that keeps your coloring pages inside the book a little bit more protected. I really like the hardback coloring books. But her artwork is going to be another one that is a little bit whimsical. Of course, it's a different type of whimsical. It's nothing like what you're going to find in a Rita Berman book. It doesn't have that cutesy look like you find in the Rita Berman book. She has lots of bottles, little potion bottles and things like that. If you want to practice coloring bottles and sort of making that see-through transparent look, you can surely do that in these books. I actually have a full color along that I did in this book. I showed how to make the bubbles inside of here and how to make this look a little bit translucent. And this was a whole entire color long. I'll link it in the upper right hand corner. But you could see by looking at this page that lots of different mediums can be used in this book. This one was done with Prismacolors. There are Prismacolors on here. There is white Posca, and I've used Stickles. I believe the background is Faber-Castell Gelatos, and they are a wet medium, and you could see by looking at the page that it did make it a little bit crumbly, but if you look at the back of the book, it did also go through a little bit to the other side. It went through here, and it made some buckling here. There's a lot of color that came through down here on this side, as well as up in this corner here. So you can use different mediums in this book. But if you want to save the picture on the other side, I really wouldn't suggest it. I did have a piece of paper behind so that it wouldn't get onto the other side here. But even doing that, it is still going to go through to the other side. And this book is all double-sided pages. So if there is an image on the other side, but you want to use wet mediums and such on a certain page, I would suggest just getting a second copy of the coloring book so you can come back and color this later, or maybe even make a copy of the page before you go coloring the page on the other side of it. If you're interested, I will link this full color along in the upper right hand corner so that you could see that. But you could see that even working with the paper that is not a complete bright white, I was still able to cover everything. I was still able to get a lot of color down there. It's still bright, it's still vibrant, and it's still beautiful. Now, my favorite pencils in this book are the Prismacolors. I really haven't found another colored pencil set that I really enjoy using in these books, but I've done a lot of pages in here where I have done completely mixed media. This is another one. There is a video on this, but here I used watercolors. I have a watercolor tutorial on my channel where I showed how to do that, and there's 2 other videos in a series where I show you how I did some of the things on this page. But again, this is a lot of Prismacolors. I have glitter on here. I have acrylic paint. The glitter is in fact Stickles. I've used a whole lot of Posca on here to really white out some of these areas. And wherever you see the gold, that is where I used the acrylic paint. And I'm going to come back and finish this page. I actually bought some iridescent paint so that I can come back and color in all of these little bubbles and make them look iridescent and reflective. But I do have plans for this page and I do still need to finish it. But as far as this book goes, I would say that you can pretty much use any mediums you wanted to on these pages, as long as you know that you're going to sacrifice the page on the back. You could see that here it really did come through quite a lot, so I won't be able to color this page. And the page is also very, very buckled, but I really don't mind any of that. I still think that the coloring page is turning out beautiful. The next most popular book that I know a lot of us really, really love are these romantic country books by Erie. This is actually the first tale. There is a second tale and a third tale, but for this video, I'm just going to go through this one because I do have some things in here to show you as examples. So let's first talk about the paper. Now, the paper in these books is very, very nice. I love the paper in these books. I have actually heard quite a few people complain about the paper in these books and say that they don't like it, but I actually really love the paper in this book and I've not had any problems with it at all. It's all about matching up your pencils to your paper, and that's one of the reasons that I am doing this video, because I feel like a lot of the information I'm sharing in this video is going to be very helpful to those of you that feel like you have a certain coloring book and you don't like that certain coloring book, or you don't like the paper inside the book. If you have the right pencils to use in the book, then you may end up loving the coloring book so much more. And the same thing goes for your pencils. If you have a pencil set that you think that you don't like, you may have just tried it in just one coloring book. And if you've just tried those colored pencils in just one coloring book, you need to grab another coloring book with a different paper in it, and you need to test it on another coloring book, because as long as you find the perfect colored pencils and coloring book or paper match, you will love both the coloring book and the colored pencil set. Again, the paper in these books is not that bright white paper. I do still love this paper. So let me go ahead and compare this one to the Hannah Karlzon book. You could see the differences in the paper between these 2 books. They are a little bit different, but they are very, very close. In all of these romantic country books, the artist actually drew all of these images out with a paper clip, and the line art is going to be more on the gray side. If you are someone who likes to color and cover a lot of your line art, this is the perfect book for that. I find that I could cover a lot of that line art without much effort, especially with my Prismacolors or my Polychromos, and I don't ever have to worry about not being able to get all that extra depth and dimension. Now, as far as the thickness in this book, I'll go ahead and do this just so you can determine just about how thick the paper is. But the paper is a really good thickness. It's not too thick and it's not really thin. Now, this was done with the Polychromos, and I really love how it turned out. There is a full tutorial on how to use oil-based pencils for this, so I will try to link that in the upper right hand corner so that you could see that. But I think I just used Polychromos. I did use a fine liner here to go over the writing because it sort of got lost after I colored over it. Again, the line art is very gray, but that's another little trick you can do. If you were to lose the line art in this book, anything you want to show up again, you could just come back with a fine liner. And then I believe that I did use a Posca pen as well, but I find that the Polychromos work the absolute best in in this book. Prismacolors also work really well in this book. This one was done with Prismacolors. Again, I used fine liners to add a little detail to the grass. There is a video on this, and I will try to link some of these videos down in the description box below if I can't link them all in the right hand corner, because YouTube limits you to sharing only 5 videos in the upper right hand corner. So on this one, I did use Prismacolors and I used Posca, and then I just used the fine liner. But the only pencils that I have found that work the best in this particular book are the Polychromos, the Prismacolors, and the Black Widows. Those are my absolute favorites in this particular book. So this one here, this was done years ago. This is when I was still very much a beginner, and this was done with Black Widows. The Black Widows perform beautifully in this book, but this was when I still consider myself pretty much a beginner, and I was pretty much lining everything without blending it in. You could see a lot of that in the flowers. They don't have a whole lot of depth and dimension, but I really love how the Black Widows perform in this book. They were absolutely wonderful. I do love how I did the little fence here, and I actually added a little bit of texture and everything all throughout the fence. But some of it is really, really good, and I think I learned a lot over time just while doing this page over the few days that it took me to complete it. And then here is another page where I tested out the Tombow Aragotin pencils very, very recently. I did not like at all the way that they performed in this book. So if you're even thinking about trying to use those pencils in this book, this is your warning. They do not work well. The color just does not lay down the way that it should. They were not layering the way that they should. And I have found so far that those pencils work really well on the tone tan paper. But in this tutorial, I showed you how to use fine liners to create realistic looking grass. And if I can link that one, I will definitely link it in the upper right hand corner, because this was a really cool tutorial and the grass looks so realistic. But this is fine liners and Prismacolors. One of the next books that I feel like is one of the most popular among us colorists is the Maria Trolle books. This one is Botanicum. Let's first talk about the paper again. So the paper in these books is a very nice quality paper. The book is a hardback, so again, they're very much like the Hannah Karlzon books. And I have often wondered if the paper is the same or different, because to me, it feels very different for me working in the Hannah Karlzon books than it does working in these books. And I really love the paper in these books. And my Prismacolors do feel different than in those books, but they both have the same publisher, Gibbs Smith. So it's a little bit confusing, and I've really been wondering this for quite a while, if they use different paper in these books or they use the same paper. But I do really think this one looks a little bit brighter than the paper in the Maria Trolle book does. And as far as the way that they do feel extremely similar, but I just feel like I have a different experience when I'm coloring in the Maria Trolle books than I do in the Hannah Karlzon books, and maybe it is just the artwork, I don't know. But I really, really love the Maria Trolle books. These books are one of the books that I feel like have one of the best papers in them, because the paper is smooth, but it has a little bit of tooth to it. I feel like it has just enough tooth on these pages for your colored pencils. So I'll go ahead and flick the page just so y'all can see the thickness. But the paper is a really nice thickness. It's not too thick and it's not too thin either. I have used different mediums in this book as well, but I feel like I've used many more different mediums in the Hannah Karlzon books. So I don't know, the paper in these books, it may be exactly the same. I should reach out to the publisher and find out, because I'm really, really curious about that. Because even though the color of the paper looks a little bit different, it may still be the same paper. It just may vary just a little bit between the books. But these books too do have an image on both sides. So if you are going to use a medium that is wet, then you probably do want to put something behind the page. So the pencils that I have found that work the absolute best in these books are the Derwent Inktense, the Prismacolors, the Crayolas, and the Arteza pencils. Those are my absolute favorites, and I absolutely love the Crayolas in these books. This is a tutorial I did, and this was done with the Derwent ink tints. You could see that the Derwent ink tints go down beautifully in these books. I'm also currently working on this adorable little frog here. This was also done with Derwent ink tints, and I do plan on finishing this page, so that will probably be the next video I film, I think. But I even used alcohol marker to demonstrate some of the different Derwent techniques on this page. And a lot of you were asking me in the comments to show you the back of the page. And so here is the back of the page, and it did not go through. Nothing went through at all. So you can freely use your Derwent ink tints in this book, but even when I used the alcohol marker blender, it did not go through either. You could go back and watch the video tutorial on this and see where I used the alcohol marker colorless blender, but absolutely nothing went through. And the Derwent ink tints are a joy to use in these books. Now, I'm so curious about the difference between the paper and the Hannah Karlzon books and these, since the publisher in the American version of these books is Gibbs Smith. I think I may reach out to the publisher and see if it's the same paper, because I am super curious. So after I do that, I will update you all. But I'm thinking now that I want to try my Derwent ink tints in the Hannah Karlzon books and see how they perform, because these perform absolutely beautiful in here. But I've used a few different mediums in these books, and they handle it quite well. Just like with the Hannah Karlzon books, you have to be careful what you're using, because you may not be happy if you lose the artwork on the other side. And again, I suggest either printing out the paper on the other side so you could color it in the future, or having an extra copy of these books. And they're not that expensive. They're between $11 and $13 on Amazon, and I feel like that's a really good price for a hardback book. But you could see throughout Maria Trolle's books, she does have some of the pages that have this black background, and I've not colored any of these pages yet because I don't know if I'm really crazy about the black background. I really would like the opportunity to create a background if I want to, and I really like how my colors stand out off of the white background. And if I wanted a black background, I like to have the opportunity to actually color in my own black background, I guess. But the only time I've ever really done that is if I'm using very bright, vibrant colors. A really good idea for some of these pages, and maybe I'll try it. But I would think that if you were just using nothing but a neon colored pencil set and some very bright highlights, that would probably look really beautiful on these pages with the black backgrounds. This one I started and I never finished it, but this was done with Black Widows, and they perform well. They're just not my absolute favorite. If I look at her hair, there are some spots that I feel like probably could have been blended in quite a bit better. But I do like the petals on the flower and the colors that I chose, but I could still see some areas that didn't blend together perfectly. But I do really like the leaves and how the leaves turned out. But if I look really closely, there are still some areas that could have blended a little bit better. So generally when I talk about which pencils work better on which paper and in which books, I'm really going by the blendability of the pencils and how they lay down and how many layers I'm able to get down on the paper and all of that. So these, I would say, come in probably a close second. If you wanted to use your Black Widows, you'd be okay using them. But if I wanted to stick with a more budget-friendly set and use them in these books, I would probably go with something like the Artezas. But the ones that I know work very well are, again, the ink tints, the Prismacolors, the Crayolas work beautifully, and the Arteza pencils, and I'm going to show you some examples of that. Oh, and the other pencils that I totally forgot that work really beautifully in these books are the Brute Pruner square pencils. This was done with the Brute Pruner square pencils, and they perform so nicely in these books. It's almost unbelievable. I absolutely love them. And then this was done with the Artezas. This was a tutorial on my channel, probably one of the most popular videos I have. It has almost 50,000 views at this point, but I showed how to create texture here on this little tin can, and shadows and highlights and all of that. So if you haven't seen that, I'll try to link that one as well. But this was done with Artezas, and Artezas work beautifully on this paper. And then here is the butterfly that I colored with Crayolas, and the Crayolas perform wonderfully in this book. This is also a tutorial on my channel, but if I'm going to pull out my Crayolas and I want to color with my Crayolas and I want to make something beautiful, I pull out this book. These down here were me testing something else. I don't even remember what I was testing, but whatever I was testing, I don't feel like they worked very well on this paper. I wish I remembered what it was, but I can't remember right at this moment. And the next book I have is Kirby Rosanes' Worlds Within Worlds. And I feel like his books are really popular in the coloring community. These books are really good quality. They do have a soft cover. They do not have the hard cover, but the paper inside is super, super nice. Now, it does feel a little bit smoother. It, again, has a very little bit of tooth. It's not a toothy paper. Now, if I were to compare the way that the paper feels to the Rita Berman books, I would even say that the Rita Berman books have a little bit more tooth. This one does feel a bit smoother, and I still find these Rita Berman books to have quite smooth paper. Now, as far as the color of the paper, I do consider the Rita Berman books to have a pretty bright white paper in them. Okay, so I switched to a page here where we have a little bit more background space so we could really compare these. But looking really, really closely, it looks like the Rita Berman book does have a brighter white paper than the Kirby Rosanes books, but the Kirby Rosanes books, they do have a pretty white paper. I'll go ahead and compare it to the Hannah Karlzon book because I feel like a lot of us do have the Hannah Karlzon books, but you could see how different the color is from this paper to this paper. So this paper is going to be a much brighter white than something like a Hannah Karlzon book. And then as far as the thickness of the paper, this paper is pretty thick and it is pretty good quality. Now, I have seen a lot of colorists used many different mediums in these books. I've seen people use the Derwent Inktense. I've seen watercolors on these pages. I have seen so many different things, acrylic paint, and I would assume that you could really put anything at these pages that you wanted to because of the thickness and the quality of the paper. But you would, again, need to put something behind it because, again, this book is just like the Hannah Karlzon book and the Maria Trolle book where you do have artwork on both sides. This here was, I don't even think it was a full color along, but the very first video I ever filmed on my YouTube channel was how I colored one of these petals because it was requested. This page is actually what started my YouTube channel. But when I first created my Facebook group, this was something that we were doing, and it was sort of like a color along, but there were no videos for it or anything like that aside from just me coloring the petal here. I don't remember if I did anything else in a video. I'll have to go back and see. But this was done all with Prismacolors, and then the background, I believe, was done with my Mungio pastels, and those pastels are absolutely wonderful, and they are super, super cheap. The last time I checked, they were right around $10. But if you can't afford something expensive like pan pastels, I absolutely love these. But they go down on the paper beautifully, they blend together wonderfully, and they just perform really, really nicely on this paper. You could see that I was able to get a really good blend between the colors, and I really like how it turned out. So I wanted to test out some other pencils on this paper because most of the time I'm using Prismacolors in this book because I love the way that they perform. This here, I believe I tested some pencils in a video, and I can't remember which one it was. It might have been one of the Brutfuner sets, I can't remember, but it was in a video where I was testing one particular set of pencils. I'll have to go back and look and see if I can find it. But this one here I colored just before I started filming, and this was done with the Polychromos. Now, I will say they did work nicely, and I was okay with them, but I don't feel like they worked as well as something like a Prismacolor or even the Derwent Inktense. But if I had to choose between two different pencil sets, I would go with the Prismacolors before I used the Polychromos in this book. So I wish I could find what I colored with the Derwent Inktense. I can't remember, it must have been in another book because I wanted to show you all the sample, but I've looked through my books and I can't find it. But I know for sure I've used Derwent Inktense in these books. They work wonderfully in these books, and Prismacolors would actually be my go-to pencils to use in these books as well. But like I said, I've seen so many other colorists use so many different mediums on these books, watercolors, and I've seen others use Derwent Inktense and acrylic paint and all kinds of things. But I do love the paper in these books, even though it is a little bit smoother. Okay, y'all, so this is probably one of the most popular books, and that's why I wanted to save it for last, because I have a lot to say about this one. I have a lot of examples to show you in this book. You can see that I've got all my little tabs over here so that I could share with you the different things I've tested. I've tested so many different pencils in this book. So let's go ahead and get started, but let's talk about the paper first. We all know that the paper in Johanna Basford books is a wonderful paper. It works with so many different pencils and so many different mediums, and I just love the paper in this book. The same goes for her other coloring books. I am referring to the US versions of the books because I am not familiar with any other versions of these coloring books, but I do really love the paper that is in the US versions, and that is what this is. So as far as the color of the paper, the color is a little bit more of an off-white. And again, I will grab the Rita Berman book so that you can see that, but you can see a huge difference in the color. This is a really bright white paper. It's beautiful, but I do like this one as well. But you could definitely see that there's a huge difference in the paper between these two books. Now, as far as the thickness in these books, let me go ahead and flick the paper. And just from flicking it, you can probably tell that this paper is thicker than some of the paper in the other books that I've shown you. And that's why I love these books so much. Most all pencils perform wonderfully in this book. I've tested out quite a few, and that's what this page is for. Some of these were tutorials on my channel, and some of them were me just testing different pencils out. I believe this one here was the Artezas. I'm really not positive. This one here was definitely Artezas. And I will say that I am not crazy about the way that the Arteza color pencils perform in this book on this paper. They are not my favorite. Some of my absolute favorites to use in this book are the Black Widows. This was a tutorial on my channel. This was done with the Black Widow pencils. This one here was done with Prismacolors. This one was a beginner tutorial showing you that you can use just 3 colors and create something absolutely beautiful. So my color combination consists of just 3 different colors for the leaves and then 3 different colors for the petals on the flower, and I was actually using my color combinations that I shared with y'all in a previous video. But this was with Prismacolors, and you could see that the Prismacolors do look very similar to what I was able to create with the Black Widows. I absolutely love those in this book. This one here was done with Crayolas, and I really did not care for the way that the Crayolas worked in this book. It does look nice, but I feel like that was a lot of work to get it to where it is. This one over here is another tutorial I did on my channel. This was done with Black Widows, and in this video I was just testing the Black Widows. I think it's called something like really putting the Black Widows to the test, where I was trying to see how 2 different contrasting colors blended together. But the Black Widows do perform absolutely beautiful in these books, and I was able to get a blue to blend beautifully with some shades of orange. This was a tutorial on my channel also. This one was done with Prismacolors. I am literally obsessed with that leaf. I absolutely love it. This up here was the Brutfuner Macaron mixed with the Prismacolors, and I was testing those out for a video or something, but the Brutfuner Macarons work beautifully in this book as well. Again, these 2 pages were all tutorials on my channel. These were all done with Prismacolors. So I was using this page to color the bugs in with several different colored pencil sets, and I wanted to just color a full image and test out the different pencils. This one down here was done with the Spear Farben colored pencils. They performed wonderfully in this book on this paper. I really, really love them. This one here is done with the Polychromos, and actually what I found out when I colored this one and colored this one is that I actually liked the way that the Spear Farben worked more than I did for the Polychromos, because if I look at some of the areas over here in the legs of the bug, there were some of the colors I couldn't get to blend together the way that I really wanted to. So the Polychromos, they do work well in this book, but I found that the oranges and the reds, I just couldn't get them to blend the way that I wanted them to. Although I still do like the overall outcome of how this turned out, but I really liked working more so with the Spear Farbens. And then this one up here is the Caran d'Ache Pablo pencils, and they work beautifully in these books. And I've actually used the Pablos in another book as well, another one of Johanna's books. I can't remember which one, but I think it's in a video somewhere. I have so many videos on my channel that it's hard to keep track of anymore. But this one was at the Pablos, and you could see how bright and beautiful and vibrant those colors are. And I really, really love these in this book. And then this one here was all done with Prismacolors. This is a full color along on my channel. And the little bits of yellow back here, this again is the Mungio pastels. They work beautifully on this paper. They really work beautiful on any paper. I really love my Mungio pastels. And then this one was another one that I think was done in bits and pieces. How to color a flower and just different things I did on here. I believe several of these flowers are in videos on my channel, but I love the way that this one turned out as well. And again, I just created a heart background with the Mungio pastels on this one as well. I have also used Derwent Inktense in these books on this paper, and they also perform beautifully. But if I were a beginner and I was just discovering this hobby and I just wanted one book and one set of pencils, I would choose just one of those set of pencils that I mentioned. They all work beautifully in this book. My favorites to use in this book are the Prismacolors and the Black Widows, but that is because I prefer wax-based pencils over oil-based pencils. If you love oil-based pencils, the Schwerfarben pencils work absolutely wonderful. And you're going to be able to purchase those more on a budget than something like the Pablos, which are very, very expensive, and the Polychromos, which are also very, very expensive. I wouldn't recommend, if you're a beginner, to jump in, purchase an artist grade set of pencils. I would make sure that you really enjoy the hobby first before you go out and start collecting a whole bunch of things that may not get used. And I feel like there are so many flowers in this book, and flowers are one of the easiest things to learn on if we're just starting and just starting to come into this hobby and to learn different techniques with our colored pencils. I feel like a flower is one of the best things to learn on just because you've got all these petals laying over one another and behind one another. And if you watch one of my tutorials on how to color a flower, you will see that that is how you create all that depth and dimension. This video here, I'll make sure that is linked in the upper right hand corner. I feel like that is a fantastic video for me to reference because it shows you what just straight coloring looks like, and then it shows you what happens when you come back and add all that extra color to create all that extra depth and dimension. If you can do it on one flower, then you can bring those skills to an entire coloring page. When I'm teaching my private coloring classes, we start by practicing on flowers because I feel like you can color that flower, and once you learn all of those techniques on that flower, you can move on to doing a full coloring page, and you can apply where to lay those colors onto a full coloring page. So it just makes it really, really easy to move from one step to the next. So I hope this video was really helpful, especially to those of you that are beginners just coming into the coloring community, or even those of you that have been here for a while and you have felt like you didn't like a certain coloring book or the paper in a certain coloring book, or you didn't like a certain set of colored pencils. Always try to find the perfect colored pencil paper match, and you will be happy with both your colored pencils as well as your coloring books. So I hope that y'all enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Happy coloring. Bye.